Hi there, you're watching Time Warner Cable's local edition. This is the Sacramento Report. I'm Jaime Garza, and joining me today is George Runner with the Board of Equalization. Always good to have you here,
Thank
George.
you, Jaime. It's good to be here.
Let's talk a little bit about tax reform today, if we can. You know, there was a big push on, in order to figure out how we can get our taxes back in line. A lot of people say we're paying too many taxes, and yet it just fizzles out. So if we can do it for our viewers, first of all, what was the process that was taking place in terms of trying to get some tax reform done?
Well, you know, the effort is try to create a tax policy that favors, this was a corporate issue, for businesses, that favors businesses that actually have workers and investment in the state of California. And because the theory is, if people then have that kind of tax advantage, then they will behave differently. They'll build things in California. They'll buy things in California. They'll hire people in California. And so there's an effort that came up right at the end of the session, and I think that will continue into next year. And that is, how can we structure a tax policy that favors that kind of behavior? Because in the long term, that's the kind of companies we feel like we should have. And it really goes back to the idea that tax policy really does change behavior as a result of trying to find favorable tax treatment.
Right. And we've talked about this before. A lot of businesses are looking elsewhere to do business because of the tax structure here in the state of California. And our neighbors just to the east, Nevada, seems to be winning and stealing quite a bit of business that we think should stay in California.
Well, what the effort was to try to say, hey, look, let's give an advantage to those who actually have investment in California versus those who might just sell a lot of things in California. These would be international, national companies. And I think in theory it's a good idea. The problem was it was the idea of trying to keep this revenue neutral. What do you do with this extra revenue? Because it's going to then increase taxes on certain companies. And what do you do with that revenue? And how do you spread that out to make sure that it actually then is used for tax benefit as opposed to extra revenue for the general fund? And so I think that became a part of the debate. And part of the issue, it's a very complex issue. And so for something to pop up in the last 2 days of session, people are always a bit suspect. You're not sure what the real consequences are. And you know, usually you don't really good thought out policy when something comes up in the last couple days.
Let's look on the national front. You know, the president pushing his jobs plan, and he talked in his national address. He talked a lot about helping small business, giving them breaks, working tax forms so that it was equal for everybody. Are we looking was this what sort of the same thing?
Well, we are, although I think people are, you know, I'm always worried about the conversations and how clear they are. You know, what is it being called right now? The Buffett clause or something like that says rich people ought to pay the same as some middle class people. And really the problem is you're comparing apples and oranges at that point, because the current tax system does have a higher tax for those that are in higher incomes. And so that's the current structure already in place. The issue comes down to what they call in capital gains, and that is the capital gains tax is less. But the capital gains investment is after you've already paid taxes on your income. So, you know, sometimes those become political rhetoric instead of what I would think of as good, honest discussions in regards to tax policy.
In the last 30 seconds we have here, do you think this is something that our lawmakers can really get a grasp on? I mean, it seems the problem is so huge and it's sometimes convoluted that how do you keep it focused?
Well, I mean, I think we have to. I think we have to. We have to create tax policy that gives incentives for businesses and individuals to invest in the state of California. That's the way we're going to create jobs, is people deciding that they're going to go ahead and invest, create a business, help establish demand at that point, and that's the way we're going to do it. So my feeling is we must do it, and I'm hoping that we'll do it very quickly in the beginning of the year.
The question, can we get everybody on board? Because every time it looks like we're making progress, something comes in from the side. So
I hope we can. I think it should be a priority for everybody.
We'll keep watching. George Runner, always a pleasure, and always a pleasure to have you watching Time Warner Cable's local edition as well. Don't forget, you can watch this interview as well as others simply by going to My Government on Demand, and you'll find that on Channel 1.